Welcome back to the Valisights Podcast, the show for accountants, FP&A leaders, controllers, and CFOs who want to understand how leadership, operations, and AI are reshaping the future of business. I'm your host, Albert Ramos. Today's guest is someone who's been in the trenches and has built real frameworks to elevate overwhelmed financial leaders. You've heard of him and you've seen him on LinkedIn. Duke Heninger is the creator of the CFO System, a mentor to controllers and FP&A professionals, and a fractional CFO who's worked with over 30 scaling companies. Duke's path mirrors many in our industry and many of you that are watching and listening out there. Public accounting, his CPA license, controller roles, then into the FP&A executive roles, as well as the CFO. But the transformation came when he realized working 80-hour weeks didn't make him a better leader, made him exhausted. Now, Duke helps other finance professionals make the leap from reactive accountants and controllers to strategic financial operators. His CFO system gives them the clarity, confidence, and repeatable systems to drive value in high growth companies without the burnout. So today in this episode, we walk through what most controllers get wrong when they step into the CFO role, why small companies hire under their need, raising capital while still closing the books, how to build a CFO-ready finance function, and why Duke believes FP&A is the true and real unlock for scaling companies. If we have time, we'll get Duke's take on strategic finance and how platforms like Valisights can accelerate confidence and clarity for first-time CFOs. But we'll get right into it. Duke, welcome to the Valisights Podcast, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Albert. Great to be here. It's about time we were able to connect on this.
I know. I'm so excited. I've obviously been following you for quite some time on LinkedIn. Love your posts, and I love that you keep it real. I mean, you hit it right on the money, and I look forward to it every morning to see what you have to say as you're disrupting, you're challenging the status quo and making us think, especially as us finance leaders, whether we're coming from accounting and the controller role, or even those that are in the FP&A role looking to continue to add value and climb up the ladder into that CFO position. So I'm excited to chat through it.
Yeah, I'm excited to jump in. Let's do it.
Well, why don't we start off with your journey? I mean, how did you come about in creating the CFO system?
Well, it came from just, personal experience. Like when I was looking at how to create a system to help others and, along this same type of path that I went on, I learned that you just have to talk to yourself, this
Hmm.
person that you were 5 or 10 years ago. And that's going to unlock that's going to be the best person for you to talk to. Because there's a lot of other people that have followed the same kind of path, coming
Right.
from some type of, you know, but I would say the majority of people that I talk to are probably those that come from an accounting background. I came from the public accounting. I did the whole, I got my CPA, did the masters of accounting, undergrad in
Right.
accounting, and I was the total nerd, right? This was during 2008. Nobody was going to have a job because of all the economy, and I was like, well, I guess I should, transition into something that actually has a job. By the way, I was marketing and sales at the time, and I thought, I
Oh man, you're
gotta
throwing all
learn
the hats on.
sales. Right, right. And I was knocking doors that summer, and and I was selling some security alarms over in Pittsburgh, and I'm from Salt Lake City, you know. And then I came back from that after having a long, grueling summer, and
Wow.
selling enough, but not really being super excited, and just feeling like, man, maybe I'm just sales isn't for me,
Right.
door to door sales, I can guarantee you, is not for me.
Every,
It's like the old school stuff of a guy putting on like a little hat and going door to door and saying, "Hey, do you want to try this thing?" And I mean, in Utah, it's pretty common. There's a ton of companies that's overrun with
yeah,
door to door
I remember
salespeople.
doing it
Probably,
too.
yeah, you did it. And
Yeah.
I love the experience for what it was. It taught me how to talk to people, how to be like quick on my feet. And honestly, sales is a lot of what I continue to do today.
Yeah.
But
I can't
like
wait to
that.
get back on that piece. But you mentioned something really interesting, and I know you've posted about this before, but the conversation that we have with ourselves is so important, one of the most important. And so you posted about how some of your days, especially as you're in the controller roles and some of this FP&A function, eventually the CFO role, were 100-hour weeks, right? And what did that conversation sound like? And what was the inflection point where you knew I need to change something up here?
Well, like, at any time, you don't know what you don't know until you have to know it all of a sudden. And jumping into the controller role, it was good. I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. And and then people started asking questions that I just didn't know. Things that now I look back and it was just so obvious. Questions like, hey, why are margins changing?
Right.
What's our burn rate right now? How much, when are we going to run out of cash? How much money do we need to raise? All these types of questions are things that are all noticed. They're kind of explaining the past, but also looking to the future. This is FP&A. And what I realized is as a controller, I was getting pushed naturally into this direction of needing to know FP&A, but guess what? Accounting doesn't teach it.
Right.
And so that's where the only successful what did one of my teachers say in school, the only successful substitute for brains is either silence or overwork, right? And so I kind of chose the overwork, and and I had to figure it out. And this was a decade ago. No, this was 15 years ago, when we didn't have really, you could Google stuff, but you didn't have AI to really help you. And
Right.
so it was trial by error, and it was difficult. But I loved that experience for what it gave me, because you're not really ready to learn until you are in the middle of it.
So good. Something you also posted about, and I really wanted to get your thoughts, and I have a follow-up question too around controller to CFO, but you posted recently about how at times companies underhire for the CFO role. What do you mean by that? Can you explain kind of what you've observed as you have, supported and helped other organizations and gone through it yourself as well?
Yeah, sure. Like any founders, the founders are often the ones that are making this hire. Well, they know operations really well. They know sales, they know marketing, they know how to like create product, design if it's a product type of company. But the area they don't know is finance and accounting. And so they're kind of relying on, well, just whatever online says it should be.
Right.
So, like all of us, we're going to go to, our AI of choice and put in there, hey, write up a job description for a controller role or whatever it is that we think it is. We don't even know what a controller is. We don't know the difference between a CFO and a controller. We don't know what FP&A is at all, right? And so they're relying on this job description that they post. And and because they put controller in there, it's very accounting specific.
Sure.
And so somebody who knows accounting applies and is hired because they can do all of those things on that list right there. But guess what? The founders, they don't care one bit about the stuff on that list.
Hmm.
They only care that the information that they need is there readily available.
Yeah, in real
And
time.
sometimes
Right.
sometimes they can do that with what you're doing, but they still have to be the ones to translate it. And at some point, inevitably, they're going to start asking you, well, I mean, so what? And you're going to go, I don't know. And accountants and controllers, us CPA folk, we're really good at telling you like super obvious stuff. Hey, expenses went up because sales went up, or there's this relationship and that, and it's very black and white, and it's not always true, and it doesn't really give the full picture of what it is, right? And so that's accounting. That's what it is. And then they're pushing back on us and getting frustrated because we can't answer their question. And we're getting frustrated because we think we are. We're showing them the formulas. We're talking about, how that is so accurate. They don't care about accuracy. They care about relevance.
Yeah, you're definitely, as I watch and I see comments on your LinkedIn and I see some of the things that you're up to, you're definitely at the front of challenging the finance industry and those that are within it, us, right? One, being able to storytell and actually with owners, CEOs, a C-suite or board or private equity, being able to take what we know as the data, right, and the numbers, and actually tell the story as to why. The now what, so what, to your point. I see people like Sufyan Hamid, he was on the show, or he's going to be released soon, and he talked exactly about this, is that the technology is actually allowing for a lot of this accounting stuff that typically controllers oversee to be squared away. It's being taken care of. So they're being challenged to be more strategic and advisor, which actually sets them up better for the CFO role, which you've been chatting about, right? And then you have Paul Barnhurst, the FP&A guy, also on the show, but he's really pressing FP&A certifications. Like everyone in accounting, everyone that's a controller, you need to start learning the side of the business, because there seems to be a shift. Are you seeing the same thing? The shift into this FP&A strategic side?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, y- we're all, there's that buzzword of like, oh, AI is going to take your job, and it's like, well, the jobs that it will take, I actually don't want to do anymore.
Right.
And I don't think that those are the really valuable jobs anyway. So,
Mhm.
personally, I think, you know, I don't want to be too brazen in the fact that like there are people who are losing their jobs and are going to lose their jobs. But the reality is like we have to scale up, we have to level up,
Love that.
and we have this opportunity to be more valuable. And we just have to get more strategic from this. We have to really understand how to become data architects, how to, how to create systems that actually produce information and results that people want. Because knowledge is cheap. It's the outcomes that now people are paying for.
Exactly. Yeah, that value outcome base. That's so good. And we'll get back to that too. I had a question come through on LinkedIn, and actually, right before the recording of this, we had a couple comments. People were really excited to hear what you had to say, especially those that came from the controller or have their CPA role, and they can fully relate with you. One of the questions was, what's the common traps that controllers fall into when promoted, right? When they take on that CFO role? What have you seen?
Well, let's talk about what a controller trap is. And then we can talk about how,
Sure. Yeah.
what causes that and how to get out of it. Controller trap is when you get stuck in accounting. Okay, that's really it. Now, we get stuck from it's either too much to handle for, us, so it's like a capacity problem,
Mhm.
but most often the case, it's a knowledge issue. And we get stuck because we can only see through this small little lens of accounting. And when there's questions or when there's needs outside of that, we just don't know what to do. And so we default to that thing we know the best, which is, okay, look, if I can just jump into this accounting and dive deeper, you know. And I remember a decade ago, I would go and export various reports, and this was before understanding how to use like Excel tools or different BI tools,
Right.
and even Power Query was kind of not as great, or and it took so much time to get that information. And even before then, accounting was just compliance based, right? So you're you're
Right.
you're setting you're doing this thing that is so valuable to who? To other people, right?
Mhm.
And so accounting teaches you how to make things accurate and right and according to rules, but it's not really what's relevant to people. And so, but we keep going back to it because it's what we know. So that's the controller trap. Okay. So knowledge and time has those two issues.
Mhm.
And so how to get out of it? Well, we have to fix one of those things. We either and have to decrease the amount of time that we're spending in accounting
Right.
and really increase the amount of knowledge about what comes next, right?
Mhm.
And so to get out of the controller trap, you have to do this. Now, it's very common, at least in the smaller space. Um, and smaller space, I kind of define as sub 100 million, but really it's sub 50. You're jumping into a company, and I have never had an experience where there's not some degree of cleanup. And
Right.
so accounting is
Data
important.
clean. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You have data cleanup, or you're not tracking things at all. So how
Mhm.
can you even do accounting, or
Right.
how can you do FP&A outside of just financial stuff? But then even then, there's maybe a accrual-ish, or it's still on cash basis, or there's a lot of these types of problems, and you might be doing things right, but it's not really helpful for understanding what comes next. And so you have to, but think of accounting, or sorry, think of the finance system as a hierarchy,
Mhm.
similar to like Maslow's hierarchy. So you have this triangle, right? And at the bottom of the triangle, you've got accounting. And then in the middle of it, you've got FP&A. And then
Mhm.
at the top of it, you'll have like strategic finance. Okay. And that strategic finance can be things like raising capital or
Right.
exit planning, or tying the financial strategy into and driving the company's overall strategy, right? So you have to, like, this is both a hierarchy of order and value.
Hmm.
In order, you have to make sure there's good accounting before you can have good FP&A, and you've got to have good FP&A before you can move on to the strategic finance.
Spot on.
But the problem with the value proposition is that the things at the bottom of this triangle, this hierarchy, have a less perceived value than the things at the top. And it's perceived, this is an important concept, because accountants are very valuable, controllers very valuable, but it's perceived to the important people, okay, the founders or the
Mm.
stakeholders. And those are the people who are trying to make things change, and they need your input to be able to do that, right? So, but we have to do the accounting first.
Yeah.
And that's
I
that. So
love.
it's this. What do you call it? Um, it's a paradox, right? You
Mhm.
have to do the thing that's less valuable in order to produce more valuable, but you're going to appear less valuable during that time. So you kind of have to, like, how do you do all this together?
Yeah, you have to do it. I love that. You have to do it together. And I love that you mentioned as you climb up, right? Especially in the CFO role, your audience and those that you're presenting to or collaborating with it's a different audience, right? Compared to when you're just in an accounting role or even the controller, it's slightly different, right? It's like, is it valuable to that new audience, right? The board or private equity or what have you? Not so much being in the weeds. It's tell us a story, let us know now what, so what type of thing. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things that you mentioned when controllers specifically transition into the CFO role. That's one of the surprising things that they go through is, well, I have a whole new audience, and what I was great at and what I liked reporting on is not what they're looking for. It's something completely different in that FP&A, more so back to the triangle, the strategic finance spot. Anything else that you've found that has surprised those that you've coached through the transition?
It's the combination. It's getting the right combination
Mm.
of the value equation. Okay. A value equation is a combination of time, or let's see, it's benefit and cost, right? The benefit has to be greater than the cost in order
Mhm.
to produce value. So
Right.
it's very simple, but the cost of whatever it is you're trying to produce is usually a component of time and or accuracy,
Mhm.
or like real money. If the more accurate you need something to be, well, it's going to take more time, it's going to take more money to get there. Well, what I try to teach people and coach people through, especially coming from this accounting background, is how do we balance just the right amount of accuracy with the right amount of speed in
Mhm.
order to produce the right, something that is good enough to start making decisions on. And what I found is that by focusing on accounting, it doesn't really solve the problem. But
Mhm.
that's what accountants do, right? We're gonna jump in. Hey, we're gonna implement this system and that system, and it's going to make things more accurate, faster. But that takes time and it takes cost. And it's usually, so they're heads down and nobody can see them.
Right.
They're below this line of visibility for months sometimes.
Yeah.
And they're like, and then people are mad at them and they're like, guys, I'm trying to like do this awesome thing. And and you're just like, I feel unappreciated, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
by the
You've been
time they
doing. What have
actually
you been
start
doing over
producing
there?
it, by the time they start producing this valuable information, it's too late. No one cares. And they kind of shot themselves in the foot. And now
Mm,
they're politically, internally politically marked.
mm.
And so the difference is you have to focus on finance first before you can really dive into the system
Yeah,
or the accounting stuff.
I could hear the whispers. Were they ready? Were they ready for this? Right. To your points, at times we'll go to what we know we're good at, where we came from, because it's comfortable, and we think that's going to be the best lift. But to your point, in that executive role, the CFO role, it's a whole different ball game. And you've posted about this before, and do you mind walking us through the whole your metaphor of windshield versus rear view mirror? Uh, I love when you posted about that. And I actually shared it with a couple of my colleagues. But do you mind sharing just your metaphor there and the why behind it?
Sure. So imagine like a founder's driving, and they're in this company and they're driving this company. Okay. And they're going forward. Now they're relying on everybody around them to tell them where to go, what to
Hmm.
do, when to do
Hmm.
it, and all that, right? And so you have accounting, everyone else is kind of looking through the windshield, and they're seeing what's coming from their perspective, which is
Right.
everybody's limited. Okay. And then accounting is looking backwards, or they're looking through the rear view mirror, and they're trying to explain everything. They're trying to explain where we're going through the concept of, or from the perspective of where we have been.
Right. What we
And
passed
that's
through.
not always true. And so by the time that pivot needs to be made, we've already passed that street, you
Mm,
know, or you have to do some really crazy driving in order to make that, hairpin turn to get there. So it doesn't help companies that accountants are always trying to figure stuff out, and it doesn't help companies furthermore when we're trying to get things all accurate, and or when things are just so messy, so we don't do good closes, or we do closes that last a month, or even
or more.
even multiple weeks, right?
Yeah.
Like, we need data to be like now, instantaneous. But geez, how do you get there from
Hmm.
where you're at and which is you're swimming?
Hmm. Yeah, it's spot on. I love that. I love, and I know a lot of people out there are going to relate with that as far as, data that is looking backwards and passing. What is that? How does that help us moving forward? Now, you can argue predictive analytics, historical data, and all of that, but still, I think a lot of founders, to your point, in the metaphor is they also want forward looking, like what is ahead of us, and how can we get out in front and be strategic about it so that we not only grow the business but protect the business. And you post about, and I was cracking up the other day because I saw this and I'm like, man, he's so spot on. Because I first of all, I've been through it myself, and I spend time with others that have gone through some of the challenges and barriers and all of it, the mindset shifts that are required to go through this transition into the C-suite role, the CFO role, the strategic role. But you call it the almost CFOs. And you talked about just the mindset shift required to fully transition over. You mentioned a couple of things already that pertain to that, but anything else that you'd like to share around what is required as a mindset shift so that you're fully in it, you're ready to rock as the CFO, the new CFO?
Well, I'll tell you the story from my experience. I was, my title was director of accounting. What I really was director of FP&A,
Mm-hmm.
or director of finance. So I was over all FP&A, and accounting. And I remember creating, these beautiful models. A nice three-statement model. I had my cash forecast. I had the various KPIs, and we're
Love it.
tracking all of these things, right? So we're using the tools correctly. And but then I would go to the president of the company, who I reported to, and I said, Look, here's what I'm seeing, and here's what I'm finding." And I'd present it in this way of like, well, here's the information, let me know if you have any questions. And, or, hey, what do you want me to do with this?
Mm,
And I remember, you know, from that, in that moment, he kind of looked at me and was like, well, what should we do? And I had this like aha moment, where I was like, well, I think we should do this. And it was like, for the first time I felt like I was given authority or permission to have an opinion about the direction that we should go. And it was
yeah.
interesting when I started looking at it through the lens of ownership. Yeah, I own this.
Mm,
I can actually tell people where to go. I can use these tools the right way, which always results in this so what? And this is what we should do now. And it was really fun. And that's when I really started getting excited about finance and financial leadership. Because I
yeah.
saw how much more valuable I was from that point on. And because I took that ownership, I started to be more proactive just
Mm,
naturally, and I started to realize, hey, the buck stops with me, or it can stop with me. Or if I act as though it did, what would I do right now?
right.
And it changed how I did things. And I stopped just going to my boss and presenting something, and I started being that boss.
Hmm.
And I started going out into the organization and like asking people in the front lines, hey, what's happening here? Or what do we need to
So
change to
good.
be able to fix this? Or what's the problem? What's the solution? And I started driving those conversations. And then I was that like internal political push behind a lot of the things that we needed to change operationally about the company, and
Catalyst.
even strategically about the company. And it was refreshing, and it just took this little bit of a change. And that little bit of a change is what I look at those almost CFOs like, dude, you've been through this. You know how to come up with the answer to this. So why don't you just tell people what the answer is,
Yeah.
and then actually create the answer if the answer doesn't yet exist.
It's amazing empowerment is what you were explaining there. And thankfully you had a boss that challenged you. I thought that's it was a pretty cool story. And I know those listening, either they've had that same experience, or maybe they haven't had someone challenging them that way, and maybe this is their inflection point. I love how what you're talking about as far as being this finance executive that's also thinking like an owner, an operator. And you gave an example of getting in the trenches, or maybe even making something happen versus just presenting and waiting to see what the boss, quote unquote, the boss will do next. But you actually took the reins on, and you said, no, let me make an impact. Let me be the actual catalyst, right? Not just the strategic partner, but the catalyst. What other best practices do you have for those that have transitioned? Maybe they're a new CFO, and as we know, this shift going into FP&A, strategic finance, but also, do you understand the operations? Do you understand? Are you thinking like an owner, even a customer from their point of view? Are you getting in to the ground truth and understanding all the different levers that are being pulled by each one of your team members? Do you have any other observations or advice that you can give to some of the finance leaders that are listening to this and say, hey, maybe I need to stop crunching the numbers and actually start to understand the business more?
Yeah, yeah, I do. You know, there's a difference of internal and or operational finance. Operational finance is when you're working internally to the company to try to drive, change to make things more efficient,
Mhm.
or, save on cost, or somehow find ways to like tweak things so we can add more revenue. And these are all great. And those are going to be helpful things. But going into strategic finance requires an understanding of who all the important people are, and then what's important to them. And there's
So
more than just internal people. There's external people, the banks, investors, the
yeah,
board, and really also understanding from the founders, like, what is it that's keeping you up at night? where do you want to go with this?
It's a great question.
What's your exit strategy? And those of us who step into that role, the CFO, or I'll call it financial leader. When you're stepping into a role where you're the primary financial leader of a company, whatever position you are, you can be a controller and still be the financial leader.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can, if you're looking at ways to understand what's important to who's important, and then to make that information not only visible to them, but then start driving the whole organization to achieve what's important. And if you see differences between two different people in the way that they look at what's important, well, then your job now is to bring those together,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start to really become that strategic partner. And because you're not going to produce any change alone, and it has to be an organization-wide thing. And
Right.
it's often not even in the C-suite that the change is made. Like, it has to be an entire organization made,
Yeah.
or an organizational change. And the opportunity in the smaller space is that you're kind of in a position where you can influence bottom up and top down. And you can design the systems to be relevant, to make important information relevant to other people. You can design the strategies to how to take the company from where it's at right now to where the important people want it to go, right?
Yeah.
And then the whole time you are that wind in the sails and the rudder on the ship to make sure that we're going to go where we need to go.
Now it's a tall order though, right? And I think there's going to be a lot of people listening to this one saying, yeah, for sure. Like it can't be done alone. Number one, I'm empowered to, I'm going to learn the business, right? I'm going to be a strategic partner, right? However, Albert, Duke, I'm not a good communicator like Duke. So because it requires good communication skills to rally the troops, right? Department to department, right? It's like you said, it's an organizational wide initiative to make this type of change and impact. Where did you learn? I mean, I've listened and I've seen videos, right? I see how you write, I see how you communicate. Obviously, today as well, people get a chance to learn more about you. But where did you learn how to communicate so well? Was that through coaching or videos, or what can other finance leaders do that want to refine and polish up their communication skills?
Well, like, how do you talk with your friends?
Hmm.
How do you talk with people around you, and how do you influence somebody else when you don't feel so, state like when you don't have stage fright?
Right, right,
Okay, like, I think we are all under some misconception that influence comes from like birth,
hmm,
and that's not true. and,
hmm,
and I continually have to learn how to communicate and how to have influence on other people, and it's something to practice all the time. Now, I kind of mentioned early on that I have kind of a sales background, like a very
right,
small one, and I thought that I could go in that direction. And really, during that time, like, I always thought, hey, I could be a public speaker. It doesn't really scare me when I'm in, like, in among other people.
hmm,
But I also don't think that it's an unlearnable thing. Like, these almost CFOs I talk about, they usually have two of three things. Okay. Number one is you have to have the technical ability. Number two, you have to have strategic vision. And number three, you have to have influence
hmm,
within an organization. And the almost CFOs generally are lacking one of these. Okay. And when they're lacking technical, that's usually something that's learnable for most people. You just show them a template, and they'll be able to, do that.
right,
Um, the strategic vision is something that people need to work on a little bit, especially
hmm,
those that come from an accounting background. But again, it is learnable, usually by working on the technical side first, right? And understanding how do the nuts and bolts of this all work together. And you get very comfortable with that, and you start seeing the outcomes from what you're trying to do. It's a
hmm,
very if then type of scenario. But the influence that you can have from an organization is very much a more of a soft skill that
Right.
requires leadership understanding, that requires a solid understanding of both technical and strategic, as well as you kind of do need to learn sales skills
Mm,
or public speaking skills. But these are absolutely learnable. It's just that last one takes a little more practice and takes
that's
some understanding of something that definitely you haven't learned yet. It's, how do I make something good? Well, when you understand what other people want, then you can provide to that, right? If you can
mm,
do what they want, then you can have influence. And, I've learned from my own experience, it was by when I wanted influence within an organization, I looked to the top to see, hey, what is it they want? And the hardest part was just going and like awkwardly coming up and saying, hey, do you have a few minutes or can we book some times? I just want to ask you, like questions about where you want to take this business. Because I think that if I'm more strategic and I actually have an understanding of what you want, then I can start producing information and systems around that to make that easier for you and more possible. And you start learning, right? And it's kind of an iterative thing over time, but you gain influence by exercising financial leadership.
so good. And that's what I gather too. And there was a lot there and I loved it. But it's this leading through questions, right? It's like once you ask the questions, you have your pain points or answers, you then can go influence because you can solve and prescribe. And so that was so good. It's if you're struggling, you're trying to figure out, well, how do I polish up my communication skills or even find a way to be better at resource management or collaborating with these other departments outside of finance? It's, well, be a student. And that's what you're challenging us to do is be a student. Go ask questions from your founder or your CEO or other department leaders outside of finance to see then how can you be that glue to connect everything together to move the organization in the right direction together, unified. Now, can you walk us through your core financial operating system? Does it solve for those three areas as well? And what else does it solve for? Because I saw you post about that, and I've done obviously my research on the organization, and I love the framework. So, can you walk us through that framework?
Yeah, sure thing. So the CFO system, which is still under, it's I'm building this ship as or I'm building this plane as I'm flying it, kind of a
Yeah.
thing. I'm a partner at a CFO firm. I do work with my own clients. I've done it over time, and it's interesting how hard it is to re-engineer the things that are just working, to make it into something that can be teachable and consumable
Hmm.
by other people without totally, going off into things that just aren't helpful for them. And I've been doing one-on-one work with these controllers who are like stepping into a CFO role, or just financial leaders in general. I've been doing that work now one-on-one for over 3 years, and I've learned a thing or two.
Yeah.
That it's not just one thing. And I used to think that, look, there's these concepts. And if we understand these concepts, then we'll be great. And so I would teach these concepts and harp on them. And I found it like surprisingly, it just didn't work.
Mm.
Or, hey, let's go jump into these like tools. Okay, let's jump in. Let's start learning about like, how to use Excel or whatever. And that would be helpful for some people and to a degree. But again, it would stop. And so after re-engineering, like when did it work for people and myself, and when did it not? I found that there was this common thread. And it's not only combining the areas of responsibility for a CFO or a financial leader, but it's also doing it in a certain way that can produce the right amount of value at the right time
Mm.
and be simple enough to start, strong enough to be useful, and flexible enough to adapt to the growing business needs.
Right.
So how it starts is through it's a three tiered or a three-phase approach called see, support, and shape. So this is kind of the strategic cycle. If you look through anything that you're doing, you're going to understand that there's this portion at the beginning where you need to understand what's important, right? So I mentioned this a few times.
Yeah.
And that's part of that C phase. Okay. You got to understand what's important. Well, then you have to now go and support what is important with the right systems. And that's where we start really diving into the finance and accounting, as well as doing it in a way that won't require all of our time, nor all of our work going forward, but positioning ourselves in a way that we can now be prepared to step up into that next phase, which is shape. So once we understand what's important and we have the systems to actually support what's important, now we're ready to start shaping what's important. And this is where the strategic play really comes in. This is where, most people who reach out, they're like, look, I need help in this area.
I'm stuck.
I need help because I don't know how to be strategic. Okay. And I used to just jump right into, okay, let's talk about budgeting and how to do like an annual operating plan. Let's start talking about raising capital and what's the right debt mix of debt and equity. What is like a good exit strategy and the ways that we can look at valuation right now and in the future. How do we consider, exit waterfalls, as well as, the various ways that we can exit, or that we can raise capital, or who else is involved, right? And how do we do this over time? So I would jump right into that. And then what I noticed, though, is that those other things weren't working yet. And everything would fall apart because they didn't yet have that see and support phase. So now I'm combining all of these together with 6 systems plus an approach of the strategic cycle. The 6 systems: transactions, controlling, reporting and analysis, forecasting and modeling, capital, and overall strategy.
Excellent.
And when you can work within those in the right way, with the right approach, putting the right emphasis, the right time, then you can start being valuable today and move from being below the line of visibility to above the line of visibility, so you have more perceived value, all while you are working on how do I actually make this better and improve it.
Right.
So you can still focus, you can still get your accounting to be the way you want to do it, but with a different approach of how can I use finance and understanding what people need to get myself there.
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle to get it to fit right, and that's where you all come in. That's where you come in, right, with your mentorship and getting people through the transition or even successful in their CFO role. And I had a question, by the way. I love that framework, and I know there's going to be people that are going to want to get their hands on it. So we'll figure that out in the show notes, or we'll chat about how people can connect with you in a bit. Now, there's this huge wave, right? We came from this gig economy, and this was, years ago, even prior to the pandemic, this gig economy, this digital world, right? The shared economy. And we're seeing this wave hit finance, especially on the fractional front, right? So in a lot of ways, we're talking about the CFO within the corporate arena, right? And so you have some of these stakeholders you're already aware of. You've built some relationships with, maybe some others across different departments that you need to get closer with. And obviously this new audience, the board, the C-suite team, C-suite partners. But then there's this fractional CFO role now, right? And you have a lot of familiarity with this as well. Is there a difference when you are going into a new organization as a fractional CFO, or maybe even an interim CFO, and really the clock is the clock's a little bit shorter, right? It's like impact is ASAP. Any advice, and does the framework shift? Does anything change for that role?
So the interesting thing about full-time versus fractional is that full-time folks are fractional financial leaders.
Hmm.
In that when you're in a full-time role, your job is like 20% finance and accounting, and 80% just shepherding cats. And and you're and it's more of an operational role when you're
Right.
full-time, right? So
Yeah.
you have so much to do. And then as a fractional financial leader, you're really just focused on that 20%
Hmm.
again, you
Right.
know? And and so it's been interesting. It's been
It sounds more
it
appealing.
it actually, and it does, and that's why it's been, getting a lot more.
Right.
I mean, I I can say it is awesome because you're not dragged through the mud as much,
Mhm.
and it allows it has being a fractional CFO and fractional financial leader is actually what has helped me to really identify what are those things that we really need to do as a financial leader overall,
Mhm.
whether it's full time or fractional, because you're just focused on the core. The CFO system, it's like core financial operating system. It's like what are those few things that, if done right, can produce 80% of the value in 20% of the time. And when we do that, whether full-time or fractional, it's going to be awesome. And it has blown up. But now, well, are we really sure what a fractional CFO really is? Because I'm seeing bookkeepers taking that title,
Right.
as well as like full-blown CFOs taking that title. And what's
Mhm.
even more interesting is they're charging about the same. So
Hmm.
now we have this total confusion in the market. And you'll see on LinkedIn or anywhere else, or if you're like on Instagram and you see ads start coming up through for fractional services, and you realize that like people are capitalizing in this smaller space that has been underserved forever.
Right.
It- but the smaller space doesn't know what a CFO really should be doing, and so they're able to offer CFO services and for a higher price point because now there's this higher perceived value. Okay. And what I want to do is actually make people know. I want people to know this much and then work this much if
Yeah.
it's fractionally, right? And
Right.
I fear that just the opposite is true, where people are are performing in a sphere of influence that's bigger than their knowledge or capacity. And that's what scares me about where the fractional CFO
Mm.
role has been getting diluted over time.
Well, let's get a real case, right? And I'll pivot a little bit to there's a lot of uncertainty right now, right? So CFO, fractional CFO is faced with the situation right now. Let's take tariffs, right? There's some uncertain times. And to your point, I've also seen the same where you do have those that were bookkeepers now responsible for building out or being asked to build out because it's part of the scope of work to build out a cash flow forecast. And in this scenario, in an industry, maybe it's supply chain heavy or manufacturing or what have you, maybe even international, not just domestic. And there's this tariff impact where it's just like we don't know what's going to every week's different. What's the approach? What's your advice for that one? Maybe they bit off a little too much than they can chew, right? What's the game plan there? What would you advise them to do?
I think that we all learn from each other.
Hmm.
And everything that I know and I've learned has been because of a combination of other mentors, some of which were like, maybe a boss. Maybe
Hmm.
they were like a paid mentor. And other people I've taken, they're my mentors. They are like an influencer, you know, and they post really cool and helpful things. And so I follow them so I can learn from them, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a combination of, look, there's information all around us. And we have this amazing thing called AI that is like makes information a lot faster and a lot cheaper to go get.
Hmm.
But you still have to implement that. And AI is not always right. So I think there's this combination of like, hey, where do we go and get our information? And our information is best when it's from a variety of sources that we can go see based off of experience,
Mm.
you know? And it doesn't have to be like we're all imperfect. And there are things that I face on my clients on a weekly basis that are like, wow, I haven't seen this one before. What do I go do for this? Now, sometimes I can go and draw upon my framework of like, I've had experience in all these areas, so I can go and like pick that little piece over here and this little piece and put them together.
Mhm.
And then I can make a decision off of that. But other times I have to go and reach out to somebody who's been through this before.
Yeah.
And then when I don't know, when there is no one who's done this before and we're all just doing it together, then I love the collaborative approach that happens when you are, joining like an organization or a community with other CFOs, and that's part of what I'm trying to build within the CFO system. Is
Yeah.
a place for people to all come together to, ask the dumb questions without it being out in public, right? But like
Yeah.
we need all of those things, and including the AI, which can definitely disseminate knowledge and information and put it in a more succinct format. And
Right.
and then we can gut check with everybody else. And as we take steps forward, what do we want to look out for?
It's really cool what you're building. And I think, your superpower, from what I'm gathering, just having followed you and now multiple chances I've had the opportunity and the privilege to be able to chat with you, is your student mindset. And I think that's what you're really trying to challenge us all to do, is be curious, ask more questions so that you can be in a position to influence and collaborate with, because back to your point, is we learn from each other, we work together, we can help each other out. That's how you move an organization in the right direction, not doing it solo or just being a technical wizard, right? And so I appreciate that you're challenging us to do that, and you're clearly, a first mover. You show too, and so I look forward to bouncing
Well,
some
thank
things
you.
off of
Thank
you
you.
as well.
Because none of us really have all answers, right?
Mhm.
But some of us are, and we all are both limited and blessed by our own experience. And
Yeah.
so when we feel limited, well, we can go and ask someone else who has more experience in something
Right.
like this, and we can rely on each other.
Well, I know another question that popped through on LinkedIn was to ask you about debt and equity. And you just mentioned it too, that strategic finance side, when it's any type of investor relation or bank relations. When you've mentored some of these first time CFOs that are responsible now and have the initiative to go and raise either debt or equity, what do you advise them to go do first? And then any watch out for is like, hey, don't do this. These are some of the common mistakes that CFOs make when they try to do some type of a capital raise.
Well, debt and equity is a very complex topic that I think sometimes we get caught up in making it something bigger than it is. And so sometimes as financial leaders, we kind of shy away from it, or we want to look elsewhere. We want to like
Right.
rely on a broker or a banker or a someone else who's done this before, and that's good because hey, you can gain a lot of experience from that. And this is what we do as part of like the organization that I'm a part of within our firm. Part of that is, hey, when there's someone who's a little more junior at this certain thing, maybe they're a great financial operations leader. Well, let's layer on a strategic CFO above them as a
Mhm.
mentor over time, and to make sure they're walking in the right direction. So that's one thing that we do, and it works very
Yeah.
well. But not that's not available to everybody because it's high cost, right?
Mm.
And the thing about debt and equity is you're just really trying to solve for a variable. If you're, let's say when you understand where you want to go, well, then you can throw that in the model. And you're really trying to solve for a few things, but one of those things is cash, right? And
Right.
you're going to go, shoot, well, we don't have enough cash to make this plan work as you guys all want to do it. So, well, where do you go from there? Well, it's debt or equity, or how do we increase the profits? And with, you have three sources of capital. It's going to be cash flow or debt or equity. So you can play along a lot with cash flow, but it's still very risky
Right.
because if cash flow gets tied up too much in some long-term investments, shoot, you know, we're out of business. We
Game
can't make
over.
payroll. And I've been there before, right? I have
Oh,
made those mistakes personally, and they're very, very painful, and they're so costly.
I just got itchy. Those are the tough. Those are some of the
Oh,
things, especially
they're
those are
so
tough.
hard,
Yeah.
and you're not, you have to make a decision without having all the inputs, right?
Mhm.
And then you're burned. Ugh, and that's hard. Well, then, okay, well, let's move to the one that's less costly, no, a little more costly, from an upfront cost, and but higher risk. That's debt. It means you have to pay someone else soon, and it might have to be a fixed fee or might have to come back in a big chunk, and you have to plan for that particular thing. Oh, but there's rules around it. Ooh,
Mhm.
and if you trip one of those rules, then you're in trouble.
You get
And
that
then
call.
those covenants, and we've I think a lot of us have had those really hard conversations with bankers or creditors, like, guys, we're about to trip covenants, you know, and but then let's go to the equity. Well,
Mhm.
equity, great, it's a lot less risk, but it's so hard to get.
Right.
And you have to do a dance. And that's where you really have to become a salesperson
I love
along with
that.
the founders, right?
Right.
And,
That's where
but
those communication skills really come in.
yeah, but it is the most costly because you're
Right.
giving up the present value of future benefits.
Mm.
And what if you calculated that wrong? Ooh, you could break the cap table. You could prevent yourself from raising more capital in the future. You could give away way too much right now, and then you're locked up in a certain way. So, how do we do things? And all part of this is when you understand what's important and understand where we want to go, then you can back into, well, what needs to be true now or the next year or the next 5 years for that to happen? And how do we make a win-win-win scenario for everybody,
I
right? So
understand.
and what's very important in all of this is the understanding who is important and what's important to them. That takes a lot of communication. And it also takes some skill because you don't want to just divulge everything. Bless our hearts. Those of us who are accountants want to just stick to the facts. But guess what? Facts are sometimes just gross,
Yeah.
and we have a hard time looking at the opportunities on the flip side of that coin. And that's
Yeah.
what I like to teach people is how can you see into the future, bring it back to now, make a plan around it, and then proceed forward in a way that you can actually communicate to other people so that they like that plan. Guess what? You just went from finance to sales, and it's amazing, right? It'll really open up the doors of your value when you can just communicate the plan and the story in a way that other people want to hear it and need to hear it.
Well, you just mentioned something, and it was a reminder for me to ask you about because I saw you post one day about how companies should actually organize or get their data rooms ready. Even if you don't need them today, you're gonna need them most likely in the future. Can you walk us through kind of your philosophy there on why companies should build their data rooms? I.e., like for instance, I'm a big fan of like Carta and some others. Why should they build them now before they need them?
Well, I have this experience right now. One of my clients, I'm raising a bridge round for, to bridge us from our seed round to our Series A, and we're trying to do debt right now.
Hmm.
And so sometimes you don't know exactly when you need it, and you don't, and it's kind of coming clearer once you start seeing that, hey, we can actually go from equity to debt, and I didn't expect that, and all of a sudden things change.
Mm-hmm.
So how it works is you go and start talking to banks, which is called like going to market, right? You start going to market and telling the story and everything, and guess what the first thing is after that meeting that they want this big laundry list of stuff. Now,
Go
they
get it
need to
for me.
see it now. And the thing that kills the deals the most, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
debt or equity, is going to be time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but this is, if you're doing a good job on all the other stuff, you'll have that data, you'll have that information, but it needs to be put in a way where it's just here and right now.
Right.
Like Albert, you've been working with smaller companies for a while. What's like, do you probably have seen like it's so hard to get founders to just to give you like Like, guys, I just need like, where's your operating agreement? Oh, it's not, someone somewhere has
It's
it,
agreements, taxes, and anything
Yep.
required from terms of loans or equity. I'm like, oh my
It's
goodness,
just so
where is
hard
it?
to get.
Where is it?
And in some cases, they've never been memorialized,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And oh, and shoot, now we have this, it's horrible to arrive at underwriting or go through financial underwriting to then have a deal fall apart because your
Mm-hmm.
cap table wasn't really understood super well.
Right.
And ooh, now we have to either have somebody guarantee a portion of this debt. Ooh, they're not even with us anymore, And you have so many skeletons in the closet that you need to figure out before going to market. So if you build the data room, it doesn't take a lot of time, and it's not painful when you do it when it's not needed. So the best time to start raising capital is when you don't need the capital. And
Love
that
it.
starts with the data room and
Great
clean
advice.
data.
Great advice. Well, I'm gonna switch gears here because we've touched on it a little bit, and I love to chat about it, and I've seen you post about it as well. But AI in the finance space, including FP&A, especially FP&A, what are you seeing? What are you excited about? And then what are you cautious about?
Oh man, AI is awesome. And I think we're all using it. If we're not, then like we're living under a rock and we should probably find something else different. And how we use it, I think we're all kind of just playing around with it.
Mhm.
And for me, it's replaced a lot of my browser experience.
Yeah.
I just go into my AI of choice, and like I have, like up on my screen, I have Chat GPT, and I ask it all sorts of questions. And it's funny, like half the time I'm asking it like more like strategic, hey, what's happening in this particular industry? Or, I'm about to jump on with a client in the energy space, or, that I don't quite understand. Give me everything I need to know. Here's the client, here's the energy space, boom. And
Love
I
it.
have everything, and just within seconds before a sales call, and then now I'm fully knowledgeable and I can speak to it. I ask it the dumb, like, hey, what's that one formula again that I can get that one thing that like. It helps me when I'm doing data cleanup. Hey, what's that one way that I can empower query do that one thing, or how can I configure that system to connect the data? It's so nice that we don't have to have the knowledge on us all the time, and and it and so this is an opportunity and it's a risk. The
Hmm.
risk is both for a company as well as us personally. And from a company, well, I did this. I did a test a while back. I was um, I was taking like CPE, right? And this is stuff that I'm just taking those last few hours that I haven't done, and at the end of this last year,
Yeah.
and I was curious, like I wonder how AI can answer these, right? And so on one of those like self-guided tests, I I went through and I had it just answer, and then I selected according to the answer that I basically like copy paste all the questions and then I go through, right? And then I hit submit, and it was 90% accurate.
Wow.
And then I did it. I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I did it again, and I did it over six of those, like those self study things. So you can just kind of get as many as you want. And I
Right.
tried it with six of them, and I found every time it was between 89 and 92% accurate. And I was like, oh, you know, that 10%, that's a big number for us to just fully rely on AI,
Hmm.
especially when we don't frame a question correctly or
Right.
use things in a way that are really going to give the context around what we're trying to do. And so that's a risk to companies, but it's a huge, so we're like in this, the opportunity is that it's transforming the financial leader into somebody who can architect data and put things in a way that AI can actually help with and produce correct information.
Right.
Okay. Like right now, I think we're still in this garbage in, garbage out scenario
Sure.
where there needs to be multiple stages, but you can use AI in the cleanup portion. You can use AI in the close and onward in the maintenance portion. You can use AI in the strategic portion. You can use AI with analysis, and there's different ways that we can do this. Well, how do we know the best way to do it? And right now, it seems like AI is, it's like this race, and we're all wondering kind of where it's going to land and when we're all going to lose our jobs and somehow there's still going to be an economy left over. Like,
Right.
do we all have to become general contractors and pick up a hammer,
Yeah, exactly.
or I don't know, do something that AI
No, that's
can't
robotics,
do?
dude. That's robotics. We
Ah,
can't do that.
oh
Yeah,
yeah, we
we're
have we
screwed.
have
We're
3D
screwed.
we have 3D printed houses now.
Right.
Um, and so without going into the whole economic theory of everything and how, there's got to be a balance to things,
Right.
we have this amazing chance to be so much more valuable than
Mm.
we once were. Now I'm interested to see, who does this really affect? It seems like it's going to it's going to kind of skip over allowing people to learn in some ways. Like,
Mm.
it seemed like the old way of doing things was, okay, you learn this particular skill in like accounting, for example, and then you go and you become an accountant or an auditor, and you learn how to like test things, or you learn how to input data. All of that stuff AI can now do.
Right.
And
Mm.
so, how do we go then from just learning this skill to producing the benefit of that skill? And I think that the interesting the interesting progression that we're seeing right now is that it's making people like look change from looking down at something to try to figure out what it is to looking up to really seeing, okay, where am I going with this? What am I trying to do with this?
What's
And
my
that's a critical
skill?
thinking skill that's great, but it does need some experience.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how to answer that quite
It's no,
yet.
it's an interesting. You made me think about so many things, and I'm cracking up because I'm going to share a video I just saw. But there is this interesting tension point where we're clearly at. There's this opportunity cost if I don't use it, right? And to your point, if you're not, shoot, please lean in because there's so much value. Uh, so many things you can use this tool. AI is a tool you can use to create value or to solve for, right? But there's also the risk. It's not foolproof yet. So, including in our space, finance, if you're using it and you're like, yep, AI did it, we're good, not going to be a good conversation, nor is it going to be, for the most part, accurate. To your point, there's still
Yeah.
this variance. We all understand that. There's this variance, there's a standard room of error right now, and it will continue to get better. But I saw this video. I'm sure you saw it, and others listening. It's probably on TikTok and Instagram, but I saw it on LinkedIn too. And it was a recent grad. I'm gonna say it's the UCLA Bruins. We're a big USC Trojan family.
All right. All right.
He was a Bruin for sure. No, but wherever he was graduating from, I forget. But he, as he got his diploma, he's holding up his laptop and showing his final papers done by ChatGPT, and he's
Yeah.
just having a ball. He's cracking up. They have him on the jumbotron,
Yep.
and everyone's just laughing. And so I'm reading the comments because I'm really curious. What do people think about this? And they're saying, he didn't learn the fundamentals and the foundation, so he's not going to be great in the professional arena. And it was a lot of that in so many different ways. But then I started to think, wait a second, what if there's something even deeper here? What if our education system, accounting, finance, economics, right? What if we're just teaching the wrong things? What if we're teaching things we no longer need to learn because we no
Bingo.
longer need to do it? And so then my thing is, well, what do we need to learn that we're actually going to take care of, that we need to use to go solve for whatever we need to solve for throughout the world or in whatever we're doing? And so I think that's also a tension point, is people
Yep.
are basing their judgment, or their judgments coming from this like archaic educational system of things that, do we really need to be learning that? And by the
Yep.
way, I see it in my 8-year-old boy at school, and he's a little mathematical, far more advanced than I was at his age. And he comes to me and he asks me these very interesting questions like, Dad, why do I need to do that if, I have it right here. We have a little AI bot it's his tutor. And it's just it's a great time to be around. It's a great time, but it's also very interesting because we're going to see some of these institutional things be forced to shift, including our education system.
Yeah, I kind of wonder on the education system if we're going to go back to like, uh, you know, well, what do you call those? Like trade schools.
Oh yeah,
Instead of learning like, hey, this big theoretical stuff, we're just going to teach you how to do something. And this time, we'll just teach you how to like know enough to know that AI is right, you know. But here's the skill, or
right.
here's how to use the AI in this way to produce that skill.
Well, the key thing, and you see it in the HR functions, and recruiters are talking about it a lot too, is upskill, upskill, upskill. It's no longer about the long curriculum. It's
Yeah.
it's the skill. To your point, yeah, it's really interesting, this kind of trade school dynamic, and it's just going to get crazier and crazier when you think about just the VR to the virtual space and at home. Like, do you really need to go to physical brick and mortar, and what does that do to the cost of education?
Yeah.
There's so
Oh,
much going
yeah.
on there.
Well, yeah,
So
cost of
interesting.
education has to go down. So now we're at this inflection point where people can't afford to go to school anymore, and there aren't jobs after school because
Right.
they're getting taken by AI. And so we need to find out a way to make it, faster and less expensive to learn that skill. And that's kind of what trade school is. But
Yeah.
look at like in, I have a music background. That's how I started. I
Oh, what do you play?
started school. I sing,
Oh,
and
like
I got
rock
some
and roll
guitars too.
screamer or
No, I can bust out some opera for you.
wow, I did not know this about you.
Yep. Sorry, we'll save that for another podcast.
Okay, yeah.
But, you know, there's these two schools of thought. One is there's something called the Suzuki method.
Hmm.
And then you have your traditional method of learning music theory. So the traditional method is like, here is A, here is B, here's C, and here's all the sharps and flats, and here's how it all works, and here's how it tells you the rules, right? Where Suzuki says, here's a tune. Okay, can you play that? And here's how you just pluck it out. And so people are practicing the skill over here and they're practicing the theory over here. I kind of wonder if with AI, we're not going to so much focus on the theory as the skill and the result. And I don't know. I think this is the hot debate.
You need
But
to roll
if you're
this
not
out, the
doing it,
Suzuki Finance Framework.
Suzuki Finance,
I
yeah,
love it. I love it.
uh,
I'll be all over it. I
yeah,
played the clarinet, by
model
the
with
way.
me.
Yeah, no, I
That's
played the
awesome.
clarinet and the saxophone, by the way. So
Oh, that's great. Yep,
I
I was a
love what you're
trumpet
talking about
player.
here.
That's where I started.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, back to AI, I think there's a lot going on, and I know a lot of people out there that follow us, and I know we've chatted about this too. What Valisights does on the FP&A front, we're really excited about it, and I think there's more. There's so much going on in the accounting space with AI and automation. I just saw I opened up QuickBooks the other day for a client, and I'm like, what the heck happened? But then I was like, finally into it. You did it. You figured it out. So there's
It's
a lot
about
going there. I'm
time,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on in the AI space, and I think to your point though, the opportunity cost if you don't lean in and start learning and just play with it first. If it's your first go around, right? Use it personally. That's the best way, and low risk versus trying to introduce it into your enterprise or organization. There could be a lot of risk there.
Yeah, no vibe coding. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go away from
Yes,
that because that's the same thing as accounting. Okay. You're
right.
going to go down a rabbit hole. And so we have to rely, like with all the garbage in, garbage out, well, we have to make sure we have good in, but then we have to figure out how to get that good out. And as long as we have that first part handled, there are various platforms for their various ways. Now, Valisights is awesome because you got information now, right?
Mhm.
And you have it in a way that's simple to understand, yet it has all the information there so you can dig further, you can dive deeper, you can get insights, you can compare yourself, you can, benchmark. Like, these are all great things, and
Right.
it's available right now. It doesn't take a lot of effort to go and produce that. That is high value. Speed, I've offended some people, but I believe that speed is kind of more important than accuracy,
Hmm.
as long as we're going in the right direction and it's good enough to make decisions on. So, yes, we're in the spot of garbage in, garbage out, but AI is, mostly accurate. It good A minus B plus
Right.
is where AI is right now, and so hey, we should all do pretty well with it.
Yeah, and that's why
But
we
it's the
preach human in the loop still, right? So when you
yeah,
get things
yeah,
from us at Valisights and when we partner up, there's still human in the loop. But to your point, speed is it's important. And I remember a mentor of mine once saying, "There's when you're making decisions, there's two different paths. There's one, those decisions where because of the risks involved and what have you, the environment, you have to be mathematically precise. You have to get it right on the money. Do not make the decision or take action until right? For instance, NASA or SpaceX, right? There's just it's life and death. Versus, to your point, there are those decisions where, and actually speed is a little bit more important than accuracy, because just go and you'll iterate and get closer and closer. And that type of decision allows for that to occur. And I
mhm,
think a lot of our decisions are typically that is speed. Accuracy will get there as we continue to learn. It's kind of like, back to your point, I'm building this plane while flying it. Well, that's what you're doing. You're getting closer and closer. Your variance is doing this and this as you
yep,
keep learning
yep,
and iterating, right?
yep,
Or we once read, fail fast would be another way
yeah,
of
yeah.
saying it. Fail fast. Just take action, fail fast. Not saying don't do your homework. Like, obviously do about 85, 90%, like AI can get you there, right? And then iterate to get to that
But you
additional
have to
80%.
understand, like what you're talking about, accuracy. You have to understand where those guardrails are at, right? And
Right.
that's where I offend people. Is I say, hey, speed
It's
is
okay.
better than accuracy, and they're like, wait, no, 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 because you have to understand this. I'm like, well, yeah, but how do you know what those are without sometimes trying? Like, I jump
Trying.
into new clients all the time, and you
Yeah.
have for the first 3 months, you don't really know what's going on, but you
Mm,
have to be valuable today,
yeah.
and that's the opportunity.
Well, I appreciate your time. I have two more questions for you. One of them came from LinkedIn. It was, what do you wish you'd known earlier in your career? What do
Oh
you wish
man,
you would have
let's
known now?
see. Like all of us stupidly and naively perhaps think, oh, if I could only go back with my brain and just put it in my body, from
I
15
challenge
years
every
ago, right?
professor. I would
Yeah, I'd be
challenge
like,
all of them.
I'm so smart and that's so good. And that's just not reality, right? But if I could take one thing and go back, it would be that stop looking at people that who are like above you as so much better than you or like untouchables.
Mhm.
And if you can start seeing people as an equal, that will help with your ability to communicate with them.
Yeah.
And it will help you to just really get what's important. And I can guarantee you that when you approach people with a genuine care and really wanting to know because it's within your jurisdiction, well, they'll tell you and they'll help you to get
Mhm.
there. So don't be so
Yeah.
afraid of it. Because I was, I didn't think I could talk to anybody.
And there's still that layer of humility and respect, but then also too this layer, and you leverage curiosity, right? And you humanize anyone of those that like, wow, they've done this, they've done that, they're way up there. They're untouchable. I cannot chat with them. Who am I? But when you really think about it, I mean, they're human too, right? They have some struggles, they have some wins. They're going to bed thinking about things just like we do. And so you said it earlier, it's reps, right? Get that first one in. It's so much easier after that to have some of these conversations that you thought, whoa, never thought I'd be in that same room or arena to have to be able to ask some of these questions and learn. But it's that student mindset. I love that about you, and I'm taking that away myself. Is, man, I need to be better there, and go have that conversation, go ask those questions, and go learn more. So
Well,
good.
I think you do a great job, and you're talking to a lot of people right now in what you're doing with this podcast and in your career, and you're positioning yourself in ways that you're asking people about them, and that's
Mhm.
great. And it's not so hard. It doesn't have to be hard, and I guess that's the point.
I appreciate that. Well, my final question for you, sir, is what's next? I know there's a lot going on, even recently with the CFO system. Can you give us some highlights, and then what's some of the vision, future looking?
Well, I mean, I'm always a man doing multiple things, and I've been able to hone in on what I really enjoy, and I enjoy both financial leadership as well as mentorship. I love learning myself, and I find that when I'm teaching, I'm learning.
Mm,
And so I'm positioning myself in my career both as a partner at a CFO firm, running with 120 financial professionals and hundreds of clients, as well as this CFO mentor. And, it's difficult to do both of those things, but I really enjoy it. And so on the mentorship side, I have just really wanted to make this available to many more people and to, help those who are in that spot where they're maybe feeling a little stuck or they're getting a new position. They probably are coming from like an accounting type of background, and they're in an emerging company, smaller, fast growing, something that's requiring, well, heavy, fast moving, iterative stuff right now, and they're feeling a little overwhelmed. Like those are the
mm,
people I love, love, love helping. And but it's just so cost prohibitive for me to do that one on one all the time. And I've done those things. They've been great and have helped people a whole lot. But now I'm getting to the point where I'm just about a month away from finally launching this thing that I've been working on for like 3 years and going back, iterating and figuring out what's the best way to do this. It's gone through so many, you know, uh, different versions and ways and approaches that I've then tested and figured out. Gotta go and toss that one and start over again because it's not working yet. And
yeah,
now it's to that point where it's working. And I'm so excited to be able to do
so
that. So the
cool.
best, and it's not set up yet, but it's going to be within a month. And then
Love it.
finally I'll have that, platform to be able to help people.
Well, congratulations. That's so cool. Can't wait
Thank
to
you.
see
Thank
what
you.
it all looks like. And it's amazing. Be proud and can't wait. That's awesome. Well, I know there's a lot of people that are going to message me about this when they tune in. There's a lot that you shared and a lot of great nuggets that we can learn from and start activating on, specifically for those, accountants that are looking to be more strategic, or that operator owner mentality, going from compliance, right, to strategy, from that, what I would call it, what you were mentioning earlier, that busy work that we're comfortable with, to actually being an influencer, making a business impact, or and within the whole organization, collaborating with other departments as well. So for those that want to learn more about you, Duke, or be ready for, be prepared for your launch of what you're about to unleash, or just learn more about your organization, where can they find you?
All right, I'm super active on LinkedIn. That's the best place to start right now. And then as soon as I can, create the more of the back end, that's when I want to really start working on that community and being more available to more people. So start with LinkedIn, follow along, and feel free to reach out with questions.
So good. Well, for those listening, as always, if you're ready to power up with FP&A, with AI, as we mentioned earlier, AI-driven insights, whether it be cash flow forecasting or strategic dashboards and executive level ready financial reports, visit us at valisights.com. Duke, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. I feel honored to be able to learn from you today. I look forward to keeping in touch. And for everyone out there, this has been the Valisights Podcast. I'm Albert Ramos. As always, see you next time, Duke. Thank you so much.